Nerdrotic.com.
After canceling Batwoman 3 seasons too late and firing all the management who fueled the DCEU failures, after canceling Batgirl, a film that was almost complete that had test scores higher than Black Adam and Aquaman 2, and selling the CW after admitting it never turned a profit, after backing the one-man crime machine that is Ezra Miller, who is a burglar, an abuser, an alleged groomer, and possibly kidnapper, and to top it all off, just a month after they totally didn't fire Henry Cavill.
We fixed the glitch. So he won't be receiving a paycheck anymore, so it'll just work itself out naturally.
As promised, James Gunn has announced his DCU slate, the early part anyway, and quite frankly, I found it underwhelming. There is some good, there is some bad, and there is some ugly, and we will go over it all, but before I even get started, this disclaimer one more time. Hollywood does not deserve the benefit of the doubt. Warner Brothers most definitely does not deserve the benefit of the doubt, and James Gunn doesn't deserve the benefit of the doubt. And as the very real concerns of superhero fatigue set in, mostly thanks to Marvel, who James Gunn takes a couple of shots at, the very legitimate question needs to be asked. Is this too little too late? Or maybe a better question, is this too much too soon? Now we have a video with the announcements and a lengthy article where he expands on things like Henry Cavill takes some shots at his own company and again takes some passive-aggressive shots at Marvel. So let's get to it. DC slate unveiled, new Batman, Supergirl movies, a Green Lantern TV show, and more from James Gunn, Peter Safran. And one glaring omission in this headline, the most important character in this entire scenario, Superman. Not to worry though, James Gunn does address that, and that is one of the positive things surrounded by quite a few red flags. The DC studio bosses shared 10 projects, talked the exit of Henry Cavill, and addressed the potential future of Ezra Miller as the Flash, multiple Ezra Millers as multiple Flashes. They introduce a slate of big heroes and lesser-known characters. The stakes are massive for us and for Warner Brothers Discovery, says Safran. And quite frankly, I think you're already making it more complicated than it needs to be because you're starting out confusing people, especially when the first thing you really did was fire Henry Cavill. Now, they say they didn't, so we'll just use this clip one more time.
We fixed the glitch.
Now, after ambitiously promising fans that they would have something to show them by February 1st, Gunn and Safran have unveiled the first part of their slate. It's a combination of big, well-known heroes along with lesser-known characters who may just become big or not, like the once obscure heroes of Gunn's Guardians of the Galaxy, which is a completely different scenario, but we'll get into that later. The duo shared their plans Monday with reporters in a petite and tidy screening room on the Warner Brothers lot in Burbank.
So as many of you know, DC has been disconnected in film and television for a long time.
That is an understatement. Just how many peripheral Batman shows have there been? Just off the top of my head, Gotham, Pennyworth, Batwoman, Gotham Knights.
And it's one of, our jobs, mine and Peter's, is to come in and make sure the DCU is connected in film, television, gaming, and animation. That the characters are consistent, played by the same actors, and it works within one story.
That sounds good and really ambitious, particularly with animation and video games, two mediums not known for their punctuality.
And if something is outside of that, like Matt Reeves' Batman or Todd Phillips' Joker or Teen Titans Go, that it is clearly labeled as DC Elseworlds.
This is a no-brainer that should have been done a long time ago, and one of the multiple advantages Warner Brothers and DC has over Marvel that they never took advantage of. But here's the problem. This is essentially the third reboot or retooling in 10 years. I think the non-comic book fan general audiences would have gotten used to the Elseworlds banner a while ago, but now it might be too confusing. Time will tell. So here's the part of the video where James Gunn has to talk up his lame duck movies.
First, we have Shazam! Fury of the Gods. Shazam has always been off kind of in his own part of the DCU, so he connects very well.
Speaking of Zachary Levi, he recently got himself in trouble with all the Pfizer simps on Twitter. By the way, Pfizer is evil, I completely agree with them. But James Gunn did address this. Actors and filmmakers that I work for are going to say things that I agree with and things I don't agree with, like a normal human being. And Gunn, who in 2018 was temporarily fired by Disney as a director of Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3 due to old offensive tweets, I can't be changing my plans all the time because an actor says something that I don't agree with.
That moves directly into The Flash, a fantastic movie that I really love that resets the entire DC universe.
Aside from Ezra Miller being the most protected actor in Hollywood for obvious reasons, I think we found another reason why they aren't going to can this movie. It is important for them to reboot and move past all these lame ducks that they're going to have to pretend to talk up for the next year. And the over $200 million price tag.
Then to move into Blue Beetle, a fantastic film.
Not really sure if this one's going to move the needle any more than Shazam will.
And then into Aquaman 2.
Starring someone who left at number 2 in Johnny Depp's bed. Also a film, once again, that tested lower than the canceled Batgirl. The one thing Hollywood is always worried about is optics. Well, how about this? As it stands right now, whether it gets changed later or not, Ezra Miller and Amber Heard are part of the DCU and Henry Cavill isn't.
Which leads directly into our next few projects, which I'm going to tell you about now. So, Peter and I, along with a group of very talented writers, have started to map out an 8 to 10 year plan of what DC Studios will be in film, television, and gaming.
Again, I would just focus on one good Superman film, but you can't unmake the soup at this point. And yes, we will talk about this team of writers.
This first chapter is called Gods and Monsters.
Okay, that sounds good.
Now this, what I'm about to tell you, is a part of the first chapter. It's not the entire first chapter. The first project is Creature Commandos. Creature Commandos is an animated series. I've written all the episodes. Something we're gonna do that's a little bit different at DC is we're gonna have characters move into animation, out of animation, usually having the same actor play their voice as who plays them in live action.
I like the consistency. Good luck getting an actor to commit to that kind of time to stay with something that might get delayed a lot, like an animated series and a video game. But I think you will notice that the first thing he announces is an obscure team that's ultimately going to be very Suicide Squad, which I am fine with. I'll probably end up liking Creature Commandos. I see Rick Flag Sr. there, G.I. Robot, and hey, Dr. Phosphorus. Last time we saw him, he had his head in between Joker's legs delivering his baby.
The next project up is Waller. This is a story of Amanda Waller, played by Viola Davis.
I'm sensing a theme here.
Viola Davis is going to team up with members of Team Peacemaker.
So let me get this straight. The second thing you announce in your big DCU Chapter 1 slate, Gods and Monsters, is Waller, starring Viola Davis, another show directly connected to the Suicide Squad, starring your wife. Listen, I get it. Happy wife, happy life, but at least wait until after you announce Superman. You know, the movie you totally didn't fire Henry Cavill for, but wait, it actually gets worse. Despite the horrible name, I still probably would have been okay with this show because I like Viola Davis as Amanda Waller, except...
And this is a story that's been created by Crystal Henry, who did Watchmen.
Hold up. Wait a minute. Something ain't right.
Along with the showrunner of Doom Patrol, which did have a couple of good seasons, they decide to hire Crystal Henry, who wrote Watchmen, one of the worst shows I've ever seen. Race-baiting garbage. A show so popular, it was given a second season and then canceled.
Okay, next up is the big one, the true beginning of the DCU. This is called Superman Legacy. This is being written by me.
Superman Legacy, that's a strange name. Let's go to the definition of legacy. The long-lasting impact of particular events, actions, etc. that took place in the past or of a person's life in past tense. That's mildly concerning considering what James Gunn says later. Again, we'll get to that, but as it stands right now, this sounds great. This is what you should be starting with. This should be your sole focus, and I'm looking forward to seeing the person you cast, the poor guy who has to replace Henry Cavill. Well, hang on. I suppose I shouldn't assume it's a guy. Gunn does clarify the situation with Cavill a bit. James Gunn blasts past DC leadership in candid comments. Gunn says DC's strategy was previously fucked up and that Superman's Henry Cavill was dicked around. During his slate presentation this week, Gunn tried to clarify the actor's exit, saying Cavill was never fired. since he didn't have an official deal.
We fixed the glitch.
Gunn went on further and assigned blame elsewhere. I like Henry. I think he's a great guy, he said. I think he's getting dicked around by a lot of people. I would agree there, including the former regime at this company. But this Superman is not Henry for a number of reasons. Gunn's Superman is a younger version said to be around 25. And as much as I don't like the decision, still, I would understand it if this was an across-the-board reboot, which it isn't. Once again, let's briefly recap as it stands right now. Currently in the DCU, we have Jason Momoa, Ezra Miller, Amber Heard, Viola Davis, James Gunn's wife, but no Henry Cavill. That being said, I really liked what Peter Safran had to say about Superman. It's not an origin story. It's a focus on Superman balancing his Kryptonian heritage with his human upbringing. He is the embodiment of truth, justice, and the American way. He did not say that. Wow. He is kindness in a world that thinks kindness is old-fashioned. Outstanding. Sounds great. Now let's see that casting.
Okay, the next thing is a big premiere HBO television series called Lanterns. This is a story of a couple of Green Lanterns, Jon Stewart and Hal Jordan, and we have a few other Lanterns peppered in there, but this is really a terrestrial-based TV show, which is almost like True Detective with a couple of Green Lanterns who are space cops watching over Precinct Earth. In it, they discover a terrifying mystery that ties into our larger story of the DC.
This, for me, is part of the good. I'm completely down for this. True Detective Season 1 is some of the best television I've ever seen, so if you get anywhere near that, this will be brilliant. Time will tell.
Next is a big movie called The Authority. The Authority is a passion project of mine. It's based on the marvelous Wildstorm characters we are now bringing into the DCU and will interact with all of our primary DCU characters.
Put in the simplest terms, The Authority is a knockoff Justice League with a gay Superman and Batman, Apollo and Midnighter. It comes from Jim Lee's Wildstorm comics, which used to be attached to Image, which DC bought. The timing of this makes no sense introducing this in Chapter 1. It would be better served on its own in an HBO Max series or introduced much later. Once again, you're introducing a knockoff Superman, Batman, and others in a knockoff Justice League before you establish the Justice League. Hell, before you establish or reestablish or reestablish the trinity of Superman, Batman, and Wonder Woman. But if you need to use a team from Wildstorm, Planetary is much better.
The Authority are a group of superheroes who think the world is broken and they want to fix it by any means necessary. I think it's a very different look at superheroes.
Ooh.
Well, I'm going to disagree with you there. It was different a couple of decades ago, but now it's just more deconstruction.
We're doing a television series called Paradise Lost. Paradise Lost is the story of Paradise Island, usually known as Themyscira, which is the birthplace of Wonder Woman. It's almost like Game of Thrones with Westeros, but with all of the inhabitants of Paradise Island.
In other words, an all-female Game of Thrones, just what the world needs. God.
But with all of the inhabitants of Paradise Island.
I did notice he didn't say women there, and we all know why.
It is man.
The introduction of the DCU's Batman is The Brave and the Bold. The Brave and the Bold is the story of Batman and his actual son, Damian Wayne. This is based on Grant Morrison's great comic book run. Damian Wayne is my favorite Robin.
Of course he is.
He's a little assassin who Batman tries to get in line, and so this is the story of the two of them and the beginning of sort of the Bat family.
First, the good news. We could possibly, finally, be getting an established Batman, Bat family, and rogues gallery of villains. Out of all the Batman stories I've read, I wouldn't have picked this Grant Morrison one first, but it's still good. The bad news, this opens the door for modernity, particularly in the case of Tim Drake and others. This also makes the Henry Cavill firing make even less sense. You're gonna have an older Batman with a younger Superman when they're supposed to be contemporaries.
One of my favorite comic book series from last year was Tom King's run on Supergirl, Woman of Tomorrow.
Kind of a red flag.
And so we're gonna turn that into a big science fiction epic film. Now, Superman is a guy who was sent to Earth and raised by loving parents, whereas Supergirl in this story, she is a character who was raised on a chunk of Krypton. She watched everybody around her perish in some terrible way, so she's a much more jaded character.
Not as jaded as the DC Comics fans. for good reason. This is the biggest red flag of them all. Tom King is everything wrong with modern comics. He ruined Batman amongst many other things. He's also a big fan of cancel culture. He was also the writer of the canceled New Gods from Ava DuVernay, one of the smartest things Warner Brothers, America's dumbest company, has ever done. My personal favorite Tom King moment when he blocked me on Twitter. But he is only part of a cast of assembled writers who are currently working on the DCEU. We start with Drew Goddard. This is good. He conceived Daredevil for Netflix, the best thing Marvel has ever done, but it goes way downhill from there. We have Christina Hodson, who wrote Birds of Prey, Jeremy Slater, who wrote Fanforstic and Moon Knight, and Crystal Henry, who wrote for Watchmen. Gunn also announced Booster Gold, which could be interesting, especially if they eventually introduce Ted Kord as the Blue Beetle, and Swamp Thing, despite already having films and TV shows, one that was recently canceled. This is the other advantage they have on Disney Marvel. It could be a hard R horror story in the DCU. That would be interesting. The other thing I wanted to talk about was the shot he takes at Marvel. Now, Deadline interprets this as a shot at DC, but I think he really takes a swing at them both. People have become beholden to dates, to holding dates, to getting movies made no matter what. At the end of the day, I'm a writer at heart, and we're not going to be making movies before the screenplay is finished. What a concept. And if that means our plan has to shift a little bit, it's going to happen. We know it's going to happen. We're not going to be making movies and putting hundreds of millions of dollars in a film where a screenplay is only 2/3 of the way done and we have to finish it while we're making the movie. I've seen it happen again and again, and it's a mess. I think it's the primary reason for the deterioration in the quality of films today versus 30 years ago. Shots fired. Now, this is only speculation, but I'm starting to think that James Gunn went back to Marvel only out of loyalty to the cast and crew of Guardians, and their split wasn't that amicable. And as far as that title, Superman Legacy, and introducing a Bat family, which could be a good thing, but I also have a concern with this quote. One of our strategies is to take our diamond characters, which is Batman, Superman, Wonder Woman, and we use them to prop up other characters that people don't know. Sounds good in theory, but considering what we've seen from Disney Marvel over the last 5 or 6 years, I have to ask, will this be introducing new characters with Superman and Batman, or a bait and switch? As James Gunn and everyone knows, this isn't adapting the Guardians of the Galaxy, which he did very well from a comic book that came out in the mid-aughts. To state the obvious, this is a giant cinematic universe, which quite frankly, only Marvel has been able to pull off to the level that DC wants. So there you have it, the DC reboot, good, bad, and dead on arrival. As with everything, I hope I'm wrong. I hope this is the greatest thing ever made. I hope it brings the fandom together, brings world peace, and ends the war in Ukraine. But it all comes down to Superman and Batman. If those films are good to great, everything will be fine. If they're not, this is dead. Good luck, James Gunn. No pressure. As we part, I would like to leave a blanket response for the inevitable comment that we'll receive that you are free to write. Why not wait and see? Well, aside from the fact that fandom speculation has been going on since its inception, where's the fun in that? If you like what you heard, please like, share, and subscribe. If you didn't like what you heard, I thank you for listening this long. I will see you in the next video.
Nerdrotic.com.